Welcome to the Real Estate Investing Club. This is the place everyday real estate investors gather to share their best stories, biggest insights, and favorite tactics to grow a portfolio of cash flowing properties in today's market. Here's your host, Gabe Peterson.
All right. We are back with another episode of the Real Estate Investing Club. I hope you guys are having a fantastic Friday or Monday or Tuesday, whenever you're listening to this. It is nice and rainy here in Seattle, so we are definitely in the fall. I like it. It's my favorite time of the year. So bringing that good energy to you guys. It's a good day for a second reason, because we have Chris Miles with us on the podcast. Chris is from Money Ripples. He has a great story from digging himself out of $1 million in debt in the 2007-2008 crash to today, where he advises people and invests as a hard money lender, invests in raw land as a passive investor, as a limited partner in other people's deals. So should be a good episode. Chris, thanks for hopping on the show.
Gabe, it's a pleasure to be here, man. And man, I don't miss that rain out there in the Northwest. I'll tell you that much. Like every once in a while I do, but man, when it's like 40 days and 40 nights of rain, I'm like, let's give me some sunshine at this point.
Yeah, I feel you. We've talked about moving multiple times. We're like, we just can't leave the green. And during the summer, Seattle is definitely the best place to be. So there's pluses and minuses to everything. The minus here is definitely the rain and the clouds, but we got over it. So let's talk about your story. I mean, you dug yourself out of a pretty big hole that a lot of people, it would beat them down and they'd go into bankruptcy. You didn't have to go into bankruptcy. You were able to get yourself out of there. So take us before you got into all that debt, and tell us the beginning of the story, and how did you get into the debt, and then how'd you get yourself out?
Yeah, like for some people, they thought the story before getting into debt was like the happy ever after, but it wasn't that way at all. So I actually started out, it's funny, I went to college, realized pretty quickly that if I wanted to have freedom, time freedom, money freedom, everything else, I should be a business owner. So I actually dropped out of college with one class to go and tried to find some business to do. And the first one that came up was actually becoming a financial advisor, that I thought was kind of intriguing, because I thought, worst case scenario, I walk, not only do I make money, but at least I walk away first, maybe I understand more about money myself. And then second, my dad, who is the kind of guy that was the cheap guy that always bought everything on sale. He always told you that money doesn't grow in trees. What do you think I am, made of money? We can't afford this, right? He would always tell me that he would work until he died. He thought that work would literally kill him. And he had already had strokes and heart attacks by this point, by his 50s. And so I said, I want to see if I can at least give him a few years of his life back. So I became the financial advisor, right? And I was going to rescue people and stuff. And 4 years into that business, my dad reached out and said, well, Chris, when are you going to advise me finally? So I sat down with my dad, first time ever, went back to Portland to go see him. And I'm sitting at that kitchen table where he told me how broke he was all the time. Find out he's debt free, even his mortgage. He had stuffed money in his 401k for decades, got the match, everything that good boys and little girls should do. I mean, Dave Ramsey probably learned from my dad. I mean, that's the kind of guy that my dad was,
Dave
right?
Ramsey.
Good old Davey, right? But I sit down, I look at all his numbers. He says, all right, Chris, I'm 61. I want to quit at some point. I want to retire. When can I do it? I said, Dad, if you want to retire today, you better hope you die in 5 years, because that's about the time you're going to run out of money. And he's like, what are you talking about? I said, well, Y2K wasn't your friend necessarily. This is in 2005. So it was just starting to come back. The market was, And I said, you just don't have enough to last your whole life, or at least not to guarantee it. Well, what do I do, Chris? I don't know. You did everything right from what we teach as financial advisors. I mean, you did everything by the book. I don't know what to tell you. And that left me frustrated. I remember going back home to Utah here, and I'm like, I don't know what to do for my dad. And of course, when the student's ready, the teacher appears. A few weeks later, I call up a friend who I trained to be a financial advisor, but then he quit a few months prior because he wanted to do this crazy thing called real estate investing, right? And so I thought, I'm going to call him up. It's Christmas time. I'll wish him Merry Christmas, Happy New Year's, all that stuff. And just see if he's broke yet. Because if he is, maybe he can come back to work for me again. So I can, make my overrides as a financial advisor off of him, right? Well, I call him up and I say, hey man, how are things going? He's like, life is great. It's amazing. My dad and I have partnered on some real estate deals recently where I've doubled his income as a professor at the local university. And I said, wait a minute, you've only been doing this like 4 months. That's too good to be true. There's no way that that's possible. He's like, Chris, let me ask you a question. how many of your clients are really financially free where they don't worry about money? I'm like, oh, come on. Like even the retired ones still worry about, running out of money, especially if they watch CNN. Everybody goes freaky, when they watch CNN, right? So no, they're all scared. Okay, great. Good job, Chris. Well, how about this? How many of you guys as financial advisors are financially free, not off the commissions you've been earning, but actually doing these same investments you've been recommending? And I thought about it. I'm like, there's guys been working here since the mid to late 1970s, and they still can't retire either. So I said, none. There's your problem, Chris. Well, give me the answer. He's like, I won't give you the answer. You were arguing with me that stocks were better than real estate. I'm like, come on, give me something. He said, all right, if you're serious, and I don't think you are. I mean, this guy did the best takeaway sales job, and he wasn't selling anything. He was just pissed off at me, right? He's like, I don't think you're really serious, but if you are, go get this book by Robert Kiyosaki called Who Took My Money, which is a lesser known Rich Dad book.
Oh yeah, I actually haven't heard of that one. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Who Took My Money is a good one. It's kind of like Who Moved My Cheese, but it's Who Took My Money, right? And then of course the other thing he says, and now listen to this AM talk radio show with these two real estate investors that were local here in Utah. And so I did. And of course, after a few months, I ended up like going to a real estate workshop, and they started just trash talking all the financial advice that I'd been giving for years. And I realized at that moment, I said, you know what? I'm done. I'm quitting because I can't stay in integrity knowing what I know now, that financial advising doesn't work. It's been proven. Like even the clients I inherited after decades can't retire. Even the financial advisors can't retire. Why would I keep teaching and selling this crap, this hopium that I'm selling people, right? How much is a hopium dealer? So I'm like, no, there's no more of that. And so I quit. Vowed never teach about money again. I would just be a mortgage broker in 2006 there and teach ballroom dancing on the side. And so I was doing that, but of course I wanted to know how they did it with the real estate. And so I started learning about how they did really like not even fix and flips. It was literally because it was such a hot market. It was kind of like 2021, So they were literally just flipping properties left and right. And so I was learning about that.
Didn't have to do anything to them, just buy them and list them.
Seriously, yeah. You just find something cheap and then turn around and list it and you made money, right? Even if you didn't buy it cheap, you just had to wait a couple months and if that. And they even had a system where it was like a 21-day sale because they would find credit partners who had good enough credit to put 0% down because they had 0% loans back then you could do. And so you just find credit partners and buy properties that way, right?
Jeez.
And then sell them really quick or sell them off, lease them, whatever you want to do. So I kind of got into that world, started learning I could like lend out my money and do stuff. I didn't realize that people actually paid to borrow money. And back then they paid obscene amounts of money, way more than they ever do today now, because people are smarter today than they were then.
I'm just curious. I wasn't in real estate at that point. What was the rate? Like what were people paying for a hard money loan back then?
Well, what's interesting is that those guys that did that radio show, they had their own real estate group, and they were teaching about these 21-day sales and flips and stuff. And the main partner, like all the partners in there, they would all get paid 5% a month on putting their money into that business. But because they always talk about becoming like the bank, right? They said, well, hey, banks do this. Banks create arbitrage. And so those partners, there was like 10 of them or something like that. Those partners said, hey, why don't we raise money from other people too and pay them 4% a month? Mm-hmm. And we keep the 1% spread, right? Almost like a wrap. And then of course, those people said, hey, I know what they're doing. How about I pay somebody 3% a month and I get more money and then I can make a split? And so it's almost became like, so, I mean, there's people getting paid, worst case, 2.5% to 3% a month, if they were like down the line, right?
Yeah.
You can imagine what happened in their future, the whole operation, especially when the real estate market started going under, right? The whole thing was like sticking a stick in a bicycle spokes, you flip over the handlebars. That's exactly what happened. And now like the guy that was the head guy of that's in prison today. And it's bad.
Yeah.
So, but there was hard money loans you could get like 2-3% a month minimum, and just amazing returns that now, like if somebody offers to pay me 20%, I'm like, you better prove the numbers will work, or I'm not going to do it, like 12%, 15%, whatever, fine. But you're getting up in the 20s, I'm going to start, questioning your judgment sometimes.
Yeah.
But like that's the kind of stuff I was doing. So between that, I took my own starter home, turned it into a rental. I actually sold it to an investor, cashed out, did the equity stripping, took all the equity out of it by selling it full appraisal, leased it back, subleased it out to a renter, was making rent off of it while getting the equity out to then invest and do other stuff with it. And so, needless to say, I didn't need a whole lot of money. I only needed like $3,500 a month to be financially independent. And I did it later that year in 2006,
nice.
Where I was 28 years old, almost 29 and financially independent, wondering, what am I going to do with my life? And And most people be like, wow, that's amazing. End of story. Right. But it wasn't because the thing that got me there, because here's the thing that switched my mindset going from like financial advisor to real estate investor, or even just investor in general, was financial advisors always tell you to set it, forget it, accumulate, right? Like compound your interest over time. And so the eighth wonder of the world, even though nobody, Einstein never actually said that, but they all misquote him that way because
Who did say that?
Well, Einstein said that compounding numbers is like the eighth wonder of the world. Never said anything. And he was referring to something, not even talking about compounding interest.
Got it.
But they twisted it. Mostly financial advisors and network marketers, I found out, do it too. They all twisted it to say, hey, compounding interest is the eighth wonder of the world. It's like,
interesting.
No, not really. So anyways, yeah. So, I mean, I was living free. I was, and then that's when the hubris and the pride came in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, I started thinking that everything I touched turned to gold. This is where a book I should have, if it was available at the time, I should have read Ego is the Enemy, because that was the biggest enemy that was my downfall. I started to spend more, increase my lifestyle. I was, buying like the big house, buying the nice Mercedes, all that kind of stuff to show off. And, and then of course in 2007, I decided to come out of retirement, teach people how I did what I did. And of course, our main market were real estate flippers in 2007, which it was just by mid 2007, flipping came to a grinding halt. It wasn't working anymore. The systems were breaking. Nobody knew why, but then the banks were starting to tighten their lending. I remember because I was trying to get a cash out refi at the time, and banks were like, ooh, get your score up 2 more points and we'll do it next month. Oh, we just changed the rules on you. Wait, if you do X, Y, and Z, then we'll give you the loan next month. And then finally in September of 2007, I did everything you asked. Now what? They're like, we stopped lending to people. And I had all this equity trapped that I watched disappear out of my house. And by the way, I did the Dave Ramsey thing. I was just throwing equity in there thinking, I'm a mortgage broker. I can always just pull it out whenever I want, because they gave people mortgages whenever they wanted back then, right?
Yeah.
It was like us, believing in the real estate market a few years back that, oh, interest rates are so low, just, get a variable rate. It's fine. It's the same kind of mistakes that we make, And so needless to say, between the business that was starting to suffer, my personal real estate was suffering. I went from millionaire to upside down millionaire. I was in the hole like over $16,000 a month, sinking fast. Real estate was sinking as well. And so I got to a point where I was kind of flat broke, even to the point where my now ex-wife, but my wife at the time, she was saying, do I need to move out with the kids? Almost like Cinderella Man moment. In fact, I'd watch the movie Cinderella Man with Russell Crowe, bawl my eyes out because I'm like, I'm Cinderella Man. Like, I'm broke. I can't afford milk. I'm on welfare. I was literally on welfare this time, by the way. So it was just a sucky time, man. So, I mean, it was great because it was that time that got me to humble myself. I didn't file for bankruptcy, but I did try to do a lot of grit to dig myself out of that hole. I stopped teaching people how to get out of the rat race because I was in it. And instead, I started teaching people how to get resourceful and find cash flow, find and free up cash, save money on taxes, whatever it might be. Basically, get really gritty and creative with whatever little money you have. And in 2009, that really started to take off. And our business almost was in bankruptcy, was able to pull that out. We went from like almost bankrupt in 2009 to like 5 million sales in 2010, and really started to take off from there, especially with chiropractors and dentists and business owners and people.
What specifically were you selling?
Really, it was just coaching. It was cash flow coaching. And so it's like, how do we find and free up cash? How do you protect your money? Things like that. Nothing with investing anymore because we sucked at it. So, we didn't trust ourselves anymore. So we really were just like people that were like business owners saying, hey, I'm making money, but where's it all going? Right. And so we would try to help them, not just like with P&L so much, but even in their personal finances. Give you an example. I had like one guy was a chiropractic coach. And we're looking at his money and stuff. We're like, okay, you're doing pretty well. You're a good saver and all that. But look, I think you're overpaying on taxes. Let's have you meet with our CPA to see what you could be doing instead. He met with our CPA and found out he was overpaying $50,000 a year in taxes needlessly. Just because his other accountant, wasn't, was telling him, oh, you can't do this stuff. You can't do that. Or here's what's conservative, right? I love those accountants that call themselves conservative. It's like, no, you're ignorant. You don't know where the line is. And so you stay way far back from the line just because you don't know the rules. Right. And that's what was happening with him. The guy literally cried on the phone when he found out you could save 50,000 a year. I had another person, like a guy that was, like he was in a business and he was kind of losing some steam. He was 62 years old, and he's like, I don't know what to do. Like I've been saving really well, but now I feel like I'm almost paycheck to paycheck. and started looking at his finances. He had $500,000 sitting in an IRA that he wasn't doing anything with. He was just accumulating it, saving it, right, for whenever he's going to retire. And I was like, well, listen, like, look at your numbers here. I can see you have some loans. If we can pay down your mortgage, because remember, the real estate values had depreciated a little bit. So a lot of people didn't have a lot of equity. I was like, well, if we can pay down your mortgage or your balance, mortgage balance to about 80% LTV, we pay it down a little bit and, then refinance it, also pay off a couple of these other loans here. We can actually free up about 4,200 a month or 50,000 a year with just 100 grand from your IRA money. He's like, yeah, but how am I going to retire? I'm like, understand, 100 grand to free up 50,000 a year guaranteed. This is like a guaranteed return, because that's the money you'll free up in cash flow. But how am I going to retire? Finally, his wife, because it's always the women that get it first. She's like, this is common sense. Let's do it. He frees up the 50,000 a year. And then, of course, from there, because all of a sudden now he's got 4,200 more bucks left in his life again, he starts to relax in his business. And so his patient conversion ratio goes up. So he ends up making like 2,000 or 3,000 more a month in his practice. On top of that, we save him about 15,000 a year in taxes too and stuff. And so by the end of the day, I mean, he's freed up like almost 90,000 bucks a year, between income coming in and money freed up from just that 100,000 he cashed out, and he still had the 400,000 he could invest, right? So it's just things like that. Like, we weren't even showing them what to do with the investments because at that time I didn't trust myself. I wasn't out of the rat race myself. So I was just teaching what I was doing, which was finding free up money. Because remember, I was paying off over $1 million of debt. So I was getting creative. I even came up with this kind of strategy called the cash flow index that you may or may not have heard of. But I've started to see more and more people online now teaching it. I'm like, that's a thing I created back in 2008 when I was playing Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow game, trying to figure out, do I invest my money or pay off my debt? Like, which one gives me the best cash flow, right? And voila, then this cash flow index is now getting taught, worldwide almost. So anyways, like, that's the kind of stuff I did.
Yeah, makes sense. So at what point did you jump back into real estate? It sounds like at this point, 2008 happened, you were $1 million in debt. You got yourself out of that by coaching other people. What point did you put your foot back on the real estate side?
2015, I was starting to build up my faith again in real estate. I mean, I had a lot of trauma there. Like, as I foreclosed on my house in 2009, and right the week before my fourth kid was born, which was a pretty traumatic experience for all of us. So I didn't buy my own house. I actually bought a rental before I even bought my own home because I was just so scared to do real estate. The thing that built up my faith was actually doing turnkey rentals instead, because I realized in the last recession, I was a horrible property manager. I always bought everybody's sob stories. I was never firm on getting rents and things like that. So I started doing more turnkey real estate where somebody else property managed for me. And that was much better. Like, then I started to build my faith slowly. I started to do a little bit more. It's almost like getting the camel's nose in the tent. You just get that nose in a little bit, try one, and you try another, and then another and another. And so I started buying more, rentals, especially, and doing things with like lending funds or whatnot, syndications, and was able to get out of the rat race again by end of 2016, where I was able to be financially independent. This time, a little bit wiser, a lot more gray hairs and, less hair because stress kind of killed it, but, all those kind of things that I was able to get as a result. So that's kind of what I did. Like, I just started to take all my cash and focus on, again, on like, I got to get out of the rat race. Let's do this. Let's get my money liquid. Let's get it out there working for me. And the rest is history.
Cool, man. So now on the real estate side, you guys are doing raw land and you're lending out money and you're investing in other people's deals as an LP. Let's take those one by one. Raw land, that's something, it's a great strategy. A lot of people do it because it doesn't take as much money to do, essentially. I mean, you can get an acre parcel in the rural area for dirt cheap. And then if it is a decent, no pun intended, good one. If it is, if it's of value, then you can add some value to it by maybe rezoning it, by subdividing it, whatever you want to do to add the value, and resell it for a pretty good profit. So tell us your strategy. What is it you do on the raw land side? And then give us the overview of the actual execution that you do.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. Well, one, I'm the passive partner. I finance it all, but I have partners who are actively doing it. So what we do is essentially we're buy up the raw land. It could be hundreds of dollars, could be a few $1,000s, could be into the tens of thousands, although those are more rare. Buy the lots, and then we turn around and sell it to, could be developers, could be retail customers, people that just want their, their place to roam their ATVs or go fishing or whatever it might be, right? Basically just sell off to them at retail price. So we buy it wholesale, sell it retail, but we do seller finance terms when we do that. So we're financing it anywhere from, could be 12 months in some rare cases, but usually it's like 5 to 12 or 15 years. And then we're just having them pay us like we're the bank. They're basically paying us the mortgage payment, getting paid monthly payments. So I'll give you an example. I mean, there was one property that we bought for about $8,000 about a month ago, and then turn around and then we sold it off for about $27,000 to them, and sold on terms. So over the next 15 years, like a 10% rate. And so we were getting paid like $400 a month on this thing we paid $8,000 for. So which is awesome, right? Like awesome cash on cash ROI compared to like rentals nowadays. I mean, I've done turnkey rentals before. Turnkeys, I mean, although they're still a safer bet to go with, you're not going to get great cash on cash returns, right? You're just hoping to at least be profitable, after capex and everything else, So yeah, definitely the raw land has been a great one, and it's just not as competitive. I mean, there are people out there, but there's so many states, right? I mean, there's so many places you can buy raw land, and it's just not as sexy. Like it's just not the place that people talk about much lately.
Yeah. So what states do you guys focus on? What's the areas that you look at?
It's nationwide. I mean, they're all over. I mean, a lot of it could be like from Tennessee, Florida. I mean, I've seen stuff in like, even like Minnesota from time to time, or Arizona. I mean, it's all over. It could be like the driest ranch land you ever see. I mean, a lot of times they might try to find land that could be, like neighbors to other owners. And then sometimes the first people they'll try to sell it to is the owners next door to say, hey, you want to expand your land? We just bought it from your neighbor, or now we're your neighbor. Do you want to buy it from us and increase your acreage? And sometimes they'll go for that too. So there's a lot of different ways to do it, obviously, but yeah, I mean, it's a surprising that sometimes the most boring piece of tract of land can make you so much money.
Yeah, for sure. Do you guys look for a specific zoning, a specific acreage, anything under like, I don't know, 10,000 square feet? I'm sure. Do you go for stuff like that, or give us a little bit more detail about the actual execution of the strategy?
Yeah, the acreage can really vary. I mean, it could be a smaller lot, in the sense that it might be, usually they're at least a full acre, if not more.
Okay.
So we don't even worry about trying to subdivide it as much, although that's a possibility if we have to. But it's usually something we could try to sell to somebody else where they may want to subdivide it, right? Like a developer, somebody of that nature. So like some of the ones in Florida, you're not so much buying land to sell to farmers. A lot of times you're buying that land because that, Florida is expanding quite a bit, and there might be some developers who want to build land on, build on that land. And so it just kind of depends on where it goes, but it could be anywhere from like a full acre to, and it could be like, I mean, hundreds of acres potentially.
Yeah, makes sense. And are you looking, I mean, I'm sure you're not looking downtown Orlando or downtown DFW or something like that. Is there a certain, do you want to be a certain number of miles outside of a major metro? Or are you looking like literally in the middle of Oklahoma? Or what is the geographic focus that you guys do?
It's a little both. I mean, there could be some rural, but obviously sometimes the rural can take a long time to sell. So it might be kind of like just more outside of certain cities. It might still be in a small town, but it could be out in the rural or suburbs might be the closest it will be. So it could easily be. I mean, I haven't seen anything that's been really like any big town metropolitan area that we're looking at. I think that's kind of harder and more competitive. And so we're usually looking at least suburbs to rural.
Yeah. Yeah, we've done land in the past. That's what our strategy was as well. But I have seen guys do, have success in major metros. It's usually things that are zoned, or at least they know the zoning can be changed, and so their value that they add is just changing the zoning. But yeah, the rural, I mean, it's just low hanging fruit. There's just so much of it out there, and that's usually owned by people who have owned it in their family for 100 years, and they just don't want it anymore. They don't want to pay those property taxes, and so you can get those ones usually at a reasonable rate.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, you guys, how do you go about finding the deals? Like, what's your main method of acquisition?
They kind of use their own little system. They use a lot of VAs, like from the Philippines, to just go and vet stuff. I mean, so they kind of have their own system of going through the parcels. Sometimes it's just literally just trying to see if there's any land available, reaching out, doing mailers from time to time, phone calls, things like that, just to try to see, what's going on in the area, if there's anything available.
Cool. Right on, man. Well, hey, I just took a peek at the clock. It looks like we have run it down. It's time to jump into the quick question round. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
All right. Starts with education. Can be any form. Could be a movie. Could be a book. Could be a podcast you listen to. I just need 2 recommendations, one for general life wisdom and then one for real estate.
Before we continue on with today's guest, I want to tell you guys about a community I'm launching on School to help investors like yourself grow your own portfolio. In this community, you'll get access to all the docs I use, all the systems I've built, everything I've used to grow my own portfolio, as well as instructions and guidance on how to get out there and find great deals, how to finance those deals, and then how to manage them for great returns. Since we're just launching it, the price will be set at a measly $20 per month, and whatever price you join at is the price you'll have for life. We will be increasing the price as the group grows, so if you're at all interested in growing your portfolio along other investors, now is the time to join. I will put the link somewhere in the bio or on our podcast website at therealestateinvestingclub.com, so if you are interested, head on over there. With that said, let's get back to the podcast.
Yeah, I would say, general wisdom. I mean, beyond Audible, right? Which I obviously love that, but I would say this: like, I actually subscribe to a letter called the Wellington Letter. I take it with a big grain of salt, and sometimes he's got some good real estate stuff in there too. But that's more like macroeconomic, that I'm looking at, things of that nature. On the real estate side, honestly, the best education I ever get is usually by being a part of a mastermind, right? And talking to people that have boots on the ground, especially nationwide, really saying like, what are you experiencing? What's happening with you? I've got so much more value from that than even just listening to a podcast. And nothing against podcasts, because I have one that's like you do. And it's good when you get people on from those groups to come on your podcast, because then, of course, you can feel like you stay a little bit more up to speed. But that's usually where I go to get my real estate info is, hey, who are the people that have the boots on the ground? What's going on in their section of the country?
What can you give a shout out to a mastermind that you found pretty helpful?
Yeah, I mean, I've been a part of Collective Genius. They're mostly for wholesalers and flippers and whatnot. If you're not in the wholesale and flipping space, another one I've done is also called Family Mastermind, which tends to get a lot of different people, a lot of info marketers and people of that nature. So you get a more wider variety. But I'll probably say between the two, I get more information from that Collective Genius, especially if you're a wholesaler or flipper. Lots of great information there.
Nice. Yeah, I always like hearing good recommendations for masterminds, because I'm the same way. I learn so much more, or at least I take the information in better when I'm hearing it from someone who's actually telling me it firsthand, versus if I watched it on a movie or in a YouTube channel or in a book or anything like that. I just feel like it sinks in better when it's from a person that I'm talking with.
I agree.
That leads us to the next question. This is for your younger self. So let's go back to the Chris who was just deciding to quit college, one credit shy of graduating. Go back to him, look him in the eye, give him one piece of advice moving forward.
Do it. I mean, even though like I don't like the things I experienced, I know that it made me who I am today. So I would just, tell him to keep his ego in check, obviously, and ultimately this, I think the biggest thing is, if I were to tell him anything, would be that you are enough, right? Because the whole ego, all the stuff, like all the things I bought to show off, almost like the pre-Instagram days of doing Instagram, that stuff, that was all because I didn't feel like I was enough. I would put the stuff in front of me thinking that was enough, and it's not. Like, I had to get to that point where I had to feel that I was enough, and then it didn't matter if I had money or not, and I made more money because I felt like it was enough.
Yeah. You called out the ego. The ego is the enemy earlier from Ryan Holiday.
Yeah.
That is a really good book for that type of topic. I feel like it's I read it a long time ago, but I just remember being like, wow, that was a good message. So good message for your younger self as well, because that is, early 20s. That's when you're really dealing with those kind of issues. Which leads us to the next question. This is about the US. It is a big place. There's a lot of opportunity out there. Give me the single metro you're most excited about investing in today.
Oh man, it depends on what I'm investing in, right? I would say the place I keeping my eye on actually is more kind of like Eastern North Carolina. I've been looking more towards like Asheville, Fayetteville, those kind of areas. I'm almost been like, okay, if I can find a deal out there, if I want to buy a property, that's kind of where I've been looking lately. I've loved North Carolina. I have a property out there already, but it seems like still, it's not as overly done like Memphis has been overdone,
Yeah. Asheville it's almost there. Asheville's really expensive.
It's getting there. Yeah. That's where like Fayetteville, like I've looked in more of that area than anything, but anything more like Eastern North Carolina, I've been looking at.
Nice. We almost,
Western North Carolina.
Right. Yeah. We almost bought a RV park in Marion, which is just east of Asheville.
Yeah.
And when I did the DD trip, we went out there and I stayed in the park, and it was like those hills and that area of North Carolina is just gorgeous, especially I'm sure during the fall. I didn't get out there during the fall. I feel like it would have been really, really pretty with all the turning leaves. But yeah, that's a really gorgeous area.
That's the thing. Eastern Tennessee, Western North Carolina is kind of where I have my eye a little bit. It's like, where do I want to move next? That's one of those areas. It's got the green, like that you're experiencing now, but a little bit more of the heat too.
Yeah. All right. That leads us to the next question. This is about lessons learned. Not every deal that we get into goes the way we expect it. In fact, most of the time something goes wrong and we get to learn a lesson. So what was a deal that went a little sideways for you? And then what was the lesson you pulled from it?
Man, I mean, the whole story was like the experience, right? But I'd say within that story, the lesson was, so I remember I took my starter home and I turned it into a rental, right? So I sold that to an investor, leased it back from that investor. Then I subleased it out to rent it out to make it real estate, the rental income. The thing is, I was so hyper focused on appreciation that I didn't even care about the cash flow as much, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was like, even the cash flow is breaking even, or even if it's negative cash flow, doesn't matter, right? Because this thing is appreciating. I'm making money. Who cares? Tax benefits, all that stuff, yada, yada, right? But I'll tell you, that's the number one thing that got me, is that I was banking on appreciation rather than saying, what's the for certain cash flow I can get on this property? Cash flow, profit, that's everything. Now banking on appreciation, that's how we all felt trapped to that, and of course, when things depreciated, then you're not really bragging about your appreciation anymore, are you?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why whenever people ask, they're not in real estate, they want to get in real estate. I always suggest people start on the commercial side, start buying larger multifamily, buy self-storage, buy mobile home parks, retail, whatever you want, because those, it's numbers based, it's NOI. You want the NOI, right. The highest NOI you can get. And cash flow is everything, and appreciation is not guaranteed as much as people say it is. It is definitely not guaranteed. House values have gone down in the past, and they could. So you just never know exactly what it is. But if you can lock in your rate, if you have a fixed rate on your mortgage and it cash flows, then not with certainty, but with more certainty that at least you'll be making money every month. So good
That's
call
why
out.
You can't focus on cap rates, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely not. It's a good, litmus test, but cap rates aren't everything, especially if you're getting it on market, because man, brokers and their pro forma NOIs are just off the chart sometime. All right, that leads us to the very last question. This is for the listeners. You've given us a lot to think about. I'm sure people want to reach out, get in contact with you. This is a two-parter. Where can they find you? And then what can they expect when they reach out?
Yeah, you can always find us anything that's Money Ripples, right? So whether it's at Money Ripples for Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever, even moneyripples.com. And we have the Money Ripples podcast that you can find on Apple Podcasts or YouTube or wherever too. So everything's Money Ripples. And really what we do is we focus on that passive investor, right? Those people that say, hey, I work hard for my money, but I'm not ready for my money to start working harder for me. That's the kind of topics we cover. Is how do you actually get to do that? How do you really make those things work? You even talk about strategies like, infinite banking, but not like the crappy stuff that's always put out there, but like, how do you actually use it with real estate in a way that works from an investor perspective and things like that?
Cool. I will put that link in the show notes. So if you guys want to reach out, just click the little more in the description. It'll pull down that full description. In there, you can find Chris's link. All right, man, that wraps it up. Thank you very much for hopping on the show.
Thanks for having me, Gabe. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. For everybody who's with us today, thank you guys for showing up. You are the reason we do this. So if you guys have any questions, reach out to me, Gabe at therealestateinvestingclub.com. If you guys want to support the show, just leave us a review on Apple. Other than that, I hope you guys have a great week. Keep rocking real estate, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
All right, before I officially sign off, I have a quick announcement to make. If you're interested in becoming a passive investor in one of my deals, my own company, Kaizen Properties, is looking for capital partners for our upcoming projects. We invest in what are known as recession-resistant assets, mainly self-storage facilities, mobile home and RV parks, and industrial properties. If you're interested in investing and would like to learn a little bit more about my company, our investing criteria, and some of the previous projects we've done, go to the Real Estate Investing Club podcast at therealestateinvestingclub.com and scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page. Click on the Invest With Us button. That'll pop up the investor form. Fill that out, and we will reach back out to you as soon as we can. Or if you prefer a little bit more of a personal touch, you can reach out to me at gabe@therealestateinvestingclub.com. So really, that is it. Again, it was a pleasure hanging out with you guys during this episode, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.